Would you believe that we're already almost halfway through the year? We finally got through 1 month without any major bombings or assassination attempts to use as my representative month image. So instead of a globally understood image of explosions or gunmen, you can all look at some investor bros crying about negative gearing, hopefully leaving all my non-Australian listeners thoroughly confused. May was a quiet month for me. I did get a couple of albums to add to the pointy end, and a couple of extra things that I enjoy talking about a lot, but it doesn't bat super deep, with my first couple of mentions here being firmly in the stocking stuffer category. But hey, you guys tend to like my stocking stuffers more than the stuff I'm actually keen on, so who knows, maybe you'd be more keen on those. Number 6. Udasa, Karavani Zijihotu. This one wouldn't have got a look in a busier month, but since it had a little bit of a stinker, here's a 10-minute Belarusian Death Doom demo. I do think a full length of this would be very pleasant, but as a little nugget, it's not really mind-blowing enough to really stand on its own. I'm a big sucker for spooky haunted house fin death melodies, and these guys are all about delivering those as frequently as possible. There's a billion bands doing this. They do sound nice and are good at them, but they're not absolute top of the tree for it either. It's a pleasant little time and one to watch for the future while not being anything to eagerly await for either. Number 5. Chained to the bottom of the ocean, let us not speak of them, but look and pass on. Sometimes I do enjoy a little bit of tone worship. I actually went somewhat close to including Sun's self-titled record last month, which is a very boring record musically because it's a Sun album, so of course it fucking is, but the production on it was immaculate. I adore that band live, and their recorded works have never been able to remotely capture the immensity of that sound wall, but this new one gets close. It really is a masterwork of sound engineering. So anyway, here's another pretty mid band with a monstrous guitar tone, but it's only 28 minutes long and has some basic sludge doom momentum, so it's better. Chained to the Bottom of the Ocean are definitely a competent sludge doom band, but that's not a hard thing to be. You play the same 4 riffs that everyone else does, and you're set after all. They have a slightly more aggressive mindset than usual, with fewer periods of minimalist, sad tone gazing than most acts in the style. Sure, all the riffs are those normal ones, but it's only the aggressive ones, and most importantly, the tone is absolutely massive, and it just smashes around for half an hour. It's heavy, it's cool, I'll completely forget about it immediately after I record this, but I liked it while it was on. Number 4. Effluence, Anticholinergic Derangement. Matt Stevens finally got around to putting out what is claimed to be the last release we'll see under the Effluence banner. This abrupt end is usually par for the course for projects running at this level of maximalism, but in this case it's a little bit of a surprise, since Effluence is so silly and broad in its range of sound options. The structural core is always the same, but when the band is so loose with what's allowed for interjections, there's really no sign that this was the final exhaustion of ideas. The massive runtime of this thing isn't a sign that it's just chucked a bunch of other stuff together or totally messed with the formula. It's still walls of pinging, gore-grindy, brutal death which constantly gives way to things that can only be described as various. Sometimes it'll be a folky little jingle, sometimes it'll be some xylophone shredding, sometimes it'll be some bird sounds or some goofball sampling. Maybe it'll be a melodic part to surprise you that the dude can actually play an instrument. There's just too many to really even begin listing them. The album is 72 minutes long, and Effluence has an oddly large amount of cross appeal because they have about 700 times as many of these breaks as any other band in the noise death sphere. So yeah, strap in, there's a lot of them. The traditional Sarmat style John Zornian freak-out noise sack stuff is largely locked into the 35-minute track, which honestly could have been the whole album within itself. It's probably the best piece of genre, but now it has saxophones, that the band has done, and probably the best I've heard anywhere. It's absolutely the highlight of the whole album. It does have some ambient breaks and whatnot, so it's not like it's all go all the time, but it's shockingly close. I do feel like the brass noise incorporates into the chunky ping wall more gracefully than the other intrusions, so it's pretty tight all things considered. I do think he gets a little bit bored of it around 20 minutes in, and the last half is just kind of random unrelated bits, particularly the jazz flute over Tool Rhythm's climax, but the first half is fantastic. Overall, this does still get a little bit too silly for me at times, because it is Effluence and they are silly, but I found the album surprisingly listenable given what it is for such a long time. Obviously your mileage is going to vary depending on your tolerance for wacky clown music and your improvised ultra brutal stuff, but I'm a fan and it's a good send-off. Number 3, Neural Indent, Thalassogene Unguents. So after I spoke about Effluence for way too long, here's another Effluence album, but under a different name for no reason. It's literally the same dude making basically the same music. Matt Stevens is basically just a high art version of the Philo Medusa guy after all. Neural Indent is, I don't know if you can call this down the line. It's definitely more consistently violent than Effluence are, even if it's not as blasty. The increased steady loudness is handled by having like 6 layers of goofball extra instrumentation randomly donking away at all times. I'd previously heard this band in the split with Gornet Coleman, and in that case their effort was basically utter shite, so I'm happy to report this one is way, way better. It seemingly absorbed more Effluence aspects as that project has apparently wound down. It has a lot of similarities to the Pianistic Dismemberment novelty album from last year. It has a lot of rumbling piano donking as a core structure, but in this case they lean less hard into the bit, so there's more guitar noise and other layers of instrumentation to flesh it out. The extra bells and whistles keep it from just being a worse Pavitsky for me. Obviously, as with the case of the last one, this is purely one for people who want arty novelty gore grind, so absolutely stay away if you already hate that shit. It's understandable. It's the exact same stuff as the pick before, it's just half as long and a little bit less openly comedic. I'm obviously quite fond of it, and I'm quite fond of this. Number 2, Ned Grabbed, Ascension. Goddamn, the kids are legit these days. Ned Grabbed are some Norwegian teenagers making some sick as hell Infesta worship. They took a few years to get this started, so that would mean that the youngest members joined this grim as hell Infesta band at like 14, which absolutely blows my mind. It doesn't quite have the brutal death leanings to be fully one-to-one, but it's very dark and evil, yet groovy and fun death metal with lots of spooky keys and pitch-shifted growls which pretty much sound directly imported from To the Depths. With a little less in the way of blasting brutality to mix up all the cavernous muck-crawling and haunted house jiggles, they've got a surprising amount of swagger in their grooves. It's still unbelievably dark for sure, but there's a lot of bouncy listenability hidden beneath all the filth. The drumming has a lot of really rockish swagger to it, which gives it a layer of fun which you don't really see in much stuff that's this bottomed out and gloomy. Infesta always stood out to me for balancing the moody and the exciting, and these kids have it sorted out too. A bit like the Retortion mentioned from last month, maybe it's not super original due to its tribute nature, but if you're going to tribute something, tributing something almost 30 years old with no follow-ups is the way to go. Number 1. Hostile, and Hedony à perte de vue. This angry, drunk Frenchman makes some very me-coded black metal. It's very aggressive and riffy, with lots of dalliances into dissonance or melody, along with a few interjections of fairly abrasive noise and effect samples. It could be argued that it's a bit of a random mess, since the composition is basically just random parts bolted onto one another, particularly in the longer tracks, but all the parts in this are furious and cool and I don't really mind. It certainly isn't genre hobby. It's all very ugly, heavy, and pissed off black metal, but it'll jump between flashy guitar solos, hate-foresty stern pummeling sequences, more melodic moments, doomed out slow breaks, and dissonant stretches of harsher and noisier things. So it is pretty random and ramshackle, but it's all related enough that it sounds more pleasantly drunk and ranty as opposed to scattershot. This probably isn't one for people who like their black metal to be really down the line in one lane or particularly indebted to the old masters, but I get a hell of a lot out of it. So yeah, that probably wasn't the most diverse, broad appeal, or noteworthy bunch of albums that I've ever covered, but that was my month. I intentionally sat on the new Funebrome so we can probably lock that one in for next month, even with it being basically an entirely different band to the one that made their glorious back catalogue. If you think I've missed anything, feel free to give it a bit of a nudge and I'll get around to it. As for what's next, I finished my script for the next little filler video in the last week or so I'll put that out sometime towards the middle of the month, and hopefully I have the next big effort video ready for July after my next recap. Whatever it is, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon.